All right, Jazz Cabbage Cafe, and we are Rickless. Looks like today
Rickless.
he might try to call in, but he's got to do a little bit of work today. We are joined to start the show off though with Mr. Hash Bash and
Appreciate you.
Anton, and our guest, although she's going to be in the capacity of a co-host for a little while, Dawn Ann,
What?
and of course Red Setter Farm noticing how perfect the intro and everything went today. I think that's what that might be about. Anyway, and it's before I forget, well, and I'm gonna have to take over for Rick here on this. But let's acknowledge our great sponsors. Hear me or not, but
No, couldn't hear you at all.
Okay, perfect. I don't know if I want to rename everybody, but we do have some great sponsors, and we'll talk about a few of them throughout the show to make up for it. Then that way, if we weren't able to hear anything this time around, I do want to start off by acknowledging the success that activists had in Birch Run.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about what was going on there a little bit, and George and his guys joined forces with the Weedsters. Latrish, who might join us later on in the show today too, and we could talk about that a little bit more. Of course, Jen and Buddy and a lot of the people that have been really proactive in the local scene, bringing attention to it and stuff. And they had a civil, unified approach.
That was a real win.
Yeah, and they decided to throw the shit out. And in fact, I heard a recording of one of the council members, and he very specifically said, there could be some issues here. We could be at odds with the MMMA here, meaning conflict in state law with this local law, which is part of the message that is given to them. So that was good to hear. And not to say they won't try it again. In fact, I think the supervisor there is under the impression that they have to have some kind of an ordinance. And of course, the next discussion with them is you don't have to. Go ahead, Adam.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, is that it's really about education, because these people are miseducated. They think that this is important and that it's needed. And when you're able to explain it to them, truthfully, this is the first group that has pulled their ordinance completely. So to me, this is the one win we've had so far. Most of these other communities continue on and pass some sort of bullshit ordinance that is really just going to end up getting challenged in court.
Even if modified, sometimes they still just
that's a loss. We don't need these ordinances. It's just not needed.
We don't need them. I don't know if it's a loss, but a lot of times
the community doesn't need them.
Right, the community doesn't need them, and nobody needs them really. They oftentimes are passed and then never enforced.
Correct.
Like the locals are believing they're covering their ass in some way, as long as they just have this as the policy, whether or not they're. And we specifically were told that in Ypsilanti, the original Ypsilanti ordinance that included, the license for Third Coast, was a shitty ordinance all the way around, and he argued against it and all that kind of stuff. And they very clearly told us we're not going to be enforcing this stuff. We just think that we should have this as our policy. So, but once they do enforce it, and it is the right person, like if Judith Pontius would have had like a different lawyer to take her through that process or that type of a thing, we could start looking at really clarifying this ridiculousness.
Well, and history is our enemy on that, because what happens is these ordinances get passed, nobody enforces them, the original intent disappears, and somewhere down the line there's an enforcement action, and the community says, yeah, we have this ordinance, look, we don't allow that. Or we enforce, and the fact that you're the first person they ever enforced it on doesn't mean anything. That's why it's important that when these communities do have a bad ordinance passed, that somebody in the local community tries to violate the ordinance so that we can get some court action. I mean, call them up. Hey, listen, we have an ordinance that says I can't do what I'm doing. I want to be your guy. Come get me.
You're right, Adam. That's the only way it's going to really get challenged and get clarified is by one of these unwitting municipalities that go in and they've had these illegal ordinances on the books for who knows how long, and then the wrong person gets trapped, and now you have an issue. And it just seems it's irresponsible again, I think, to their constituents to do those types of things because you're setting them up for failure.
First of all, I personally, I don't appreciate all that we got to be peaceful bullshit. I think that in every community, some local, some Yahoo from the community needs to stand up and scream and holler at these motherfuckers that you're going against the people's voice. We've already voted on this. And in some communities, more people voted for the medical law and the rec law than voted for all these politicians. I mean, and I pointed that out in Royal Oak, that if you added up all the votes that the 9 commission members got, there were still more people voted for weed that year. So don't tell me.
Jamie's endorsing more violence.
There you go. Thank you. I mean,
you go.
The reality is that it's the local person who's being offended and disrespected by his elected official. And so he should be outraged.
I agree with that, Adam. You know, but it's all circumstantial. I mean, death by 1,000 cuts. There are times when you need to get up and scream at these guys, and there are times when the civil approach is going to garner the most.
But my argument is the one person that gets to be upset is the constituent. Okay.
Right. Okay. Somebody who lives in the town that says, "I want access to medicine here. I don't want to have to drive to another town. I want it right here."
I'm your constituent, and I voted this way, and so did our community. And now you're going against the will of the people because the municipal league told you should. Counselor, I'd like to see one of these communities get sued and name the municipal league as a co-conspirator.
So we're joined by Attorney Paul Tylenda too. You know, they don't agree. The municipal league doesn't agree that they are trying to force these lawsuits. Although everybody else is saying that they do have an influence on it.
Well, they are going to hide behind, let's just say, what their preamble states that they do. We are going to provide guidance, and they are essentially like a fraternal group of municipalities, and the intent of it is fine. But when you have that sort of fraternity, it does lend itself to say, okay, well, here's a book on how to do it, and we're going to give it to you, and human tendency is going to say, well, I got this book on how to do it, I'm just going to follow this. So they're inserting themselves, which most political organizations try to do, is they're inserting themselves into a place to where they're trying to take out the thinking aspect of their actors. And they're saying, here's how you do it, take this and move forward. And then that becomes how the framework gets established, because all they're doing is mimicking what they've been given. So they're not thinking about it, they're not polling it, they're not responding. But
they're going against the will of the people. They're not even. It's not even an opinion that's not liked by many. This was overwhelmingly.
There's a lot of variables though surrounding that.
Well, and that's the other side too, Adams. You touched on something that's very, very true. And let me put a finer point on it: is that the constituents are the ones that are allowed to be the loudest, and they're allowed to be. Let's just say they are the ones that should be heard first. Experience has shown, and we see this all the time with anything related to cannabis ordinance, is that it's either the well-organized group of constituents or the constituents that have been there for a long time that have some type of effect or impact on the economy. And those are typically businessmen who have been there for a long time, property owners who own multiple properties in town, the known elements of the small town economy there. And they swing that power around more so than, Joe from down the street does. So that's in reality where those municipalities are bending themselves and their ears to those constituents, but it's the same, let's just say it's the same type of elitism that exists everywhere else in government that doesn't help the people, right? It helps the elite ones that can afford those sort of encounters.
Paul, wouldn't you think that all these municipalities that are basically ganging together and adopting these ordinances shouldn't there be a presumption that these things are legally sound when they're being presented to the board? I mean, some of the stuff that are being included in these ordinances are blatantly against state law. Who the hell who's approving this stuff?
That's the toughest part about that equation, is that there's a presumption that the legislative piece, which is this ordinance, that is presumed valid when it passes. And there's this legislative immunity and legislative deference that occurs to those legislative bodies, in this case, the council members, so that there's sort of this, like the Nixon defense of, because the council said it, it
Right.
makes it right.
Mm-hmm.
That aspect is, let's say, the procedural way of how these things become created. And this is also where you'll see these scenarios to where if the city attorney can't talk to council in the sense, and if public comment can't talk to council in the sense, which typically would go back and say, hey, you heard 5 Joe Public say, these 3 things, and the city attorney says, don't matter, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Those ordinances, and this is how they pass. They pass and they go through, and then once they are enforced, then you get the challenge, because now is to say, I'm enforcing this ordinance. Now you have standing to essentially challenge the ordinance, because now you're being affected by it. And we saw that in some of the townships early on with the MMP stuff, is let me not register, come write me a ticket, I'm waiting for you, and here's a lawsuit, right? Which is unfortunately the damn it, that's the proper way of doing things, but it's unfortunate that there isn't a way for, and I guess, declaratory actions. You could say, hey, I'm taking the township to court to say that to get the circuit court judge to have a declaratory action declaring that ordinance to be unconstitutional or illegal for these purposes. And that's when you can say, okay, well, it's more of a paper argument, right? Where you're arguing, saying, case law says A, your ordinance says B. It doesn't comport with what the effect or what the intent of these ordinances is supposed to be. Thereby, I'm asking the judge to declare it to be invalid. And that's something that, admittedly, those declaratory actions are not quick. They're not necessarily cheap and easy, because you really are academically fighting City Hall. But that would be let's say, the offensive way to challenge these ordinances, is to say, okay, well, as soon as you pass this ordinance, once it goes live and once it takes place, now as a member of the community, I will ask for a declaratory action to say that this is improper, illegal, and unconstitutional.
Why hasn't that happened yet? Is it basically come down to a money thing where people just haven't pumped enough cash into the cause, or what is?
Well,
yeah, probably, because a lot of them too there's the I don't know if it's an old philosophy, but a lot of times the old philosophy has been, go ahead, pass your ordinance, and you come find me.
Right.
And then once we get the ticket, now it's game on, because it's more of a responsive use of money rather than an offensive use of money.
And then a lot of the judges have found that to be a situation in which that person challenging has standing, because they are affected. But Terbeek was successful in getting an injunction before anything was enforced. Yeah. So that can happen too.
And that's the thing. Terbeek did it aggressively and early, which is where I had a few cases going that when Terbeek came out, it defeated all of the cases below it and beneath it. So I had cases that were going on that essentially became dismissed as, being controlled by Terbeek. So yeah, that would be the way to do it. And you need more, again, it's a cost issue. It's a time issue, right? I mean, it's not something that it's not a speeding ticket in terms of the lawyer's time. So it's something that really takes a big, you have to take a big look at it. But, in terms of the argument, right? Those are, again, paper arguments. Those are case law arguments. Those are precedential arguments that you can just argue as essentially as an appellate brief through a declaratory action, do the injunction, and move it that way. And it actually creates more of a, it looks worse for the municipality, because you get written a ticket and you sue the city, looks like you're a complainer, right?
Mhm.
You are suing the city because they have passed an improper ordinance. It starts to make you look at the government side, not the individual side.
Wow.
Right on.
And I assume a violation of the ordinance is going to get you through the courts much quicker than
Yeah, depending on how they write
the
it.
other,
Right.
including appeals, right?
Yeah, depending on how they write it.
Right.
Because if there's a criminal violation or like some type of taking, or where they're gonna I haven't seen an ordinance where they're gonna take your property or anything like that. But if they're gonna go through some type of penalty, then you would at least have the regular procedural timelines.
Paul, I had a question about that. As far as like we talk about takings, like I had mentioned this to Jamie a couple of weeks ago. There was a Supreme Court decision, I believe it was last year, that basically amounted a routine inspection to a per se taking. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? And
I've heard of that, yeah.
How that would apply to these building inspectors who are showing up to caregivers' residences, knocking on doors. Maybe it takes somebody to kind of challenge that case law and say, well, you know what, if you're going to try and push this, where's my payday? Because you owe me under the Supreme Court. This is a taking just like any other taking.
And that I love that argument, because the let's just say that if you were to talk to any attorney about a takings case,
yeah, they're very hard. Yeah,
I was gonna say, you're gonna kind of turn sideways and try to stop talking about it, because they're very difficult cases, especially if you have if you are the plaintiff against the government in a takings case. I mean, one of the classic takings case that established, let's just say, like opened the floodgates was the cable wire, right? You ran a cable wire across my building.
Yep.
Right. Thereby that you have occupied that space and I'm unable to use it. You have taken that portion of my property. That's a taking. Right. So you get into like, every lawyer has the understanding of how the takings clause works, and the concept of takings, but to really get to the let's say an off the shoot from the hip understanding of black and white takings case law, it's so because it's so varied in its interpretation as to did the government or this did occupy a portion of your property without due process, right? And that it's a can of worms that a lot of municipalities
I would love to see that pressed. I'd love to see one of these municipalities get hit with that. I mean, that was great. That was a great case by the Supreme Court. I mean, they changed property rights and property law in the country with one ruling. So I don't know.
That's the hard part about when you get these federal, let's say, calling it real property laws, whether it's taking or zoning, they have such a huge immediate impact all the way. But the way that I would see it that might have the 1-2 punch effect is that if you file a declaratory action, right? Declaratory action with the preliminary injunction, and then in your argument, your legal argument, argue the takings, right? You are going to, and again, the same way with judges, right? As soon as you go in there and judge, you'd be like, hey, judge, this is probably a takings issue. The judge is like, well, holy shit. We better put everybody on hold before all of us can figure out what the hell a takings is. And then we'll put everybody on ice until we can move forward. And that might be the better way, rather than, let's say, doing it the classic way, doing it the clean way. Because if you can say, hey, look, this is an inspection that at the state level, you consent to those with your application, but as a caregiver, you do not. So that would be the great, I kind of like that, man. Let's find a plaintiff.
Like that?
But that
Yes,
would be,
sir. I love it.
It's enough of a mess to where if you get the injunction and it causes trouble in the city, the city will, the intent is they'll change course and clean it up.
That ruling changed the way health inspectors can walk into restaurants. I mean, it changed every type of inspection. I mean, let alone these inspections going into private residences against people who are not businesses. These are private residences where people are residing.
There is a challenge like that in Warren. What's come of it or what's becoming of it, I don't know. I haven't had a status update. But it was, they have a restrictive local ordinance, and the cops want to inspect this guy's house based upon somebody telling them that he's growing in there.
Yep.
Just stupid on its fucking surface.
Bring it.
But they're, you know, they're saying no. You know, of course you can't. And there's no inspections, and there's no reason to believe them doing anything that's against the law.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to roll with that one. And I don't know what status is, but that could be one of the challenges anyway.
This is where it gets into that
It's 420. And by the way, Dawn, can you hear us now? Are you back on
I
track?
can hear you now.
Right on,
I
right on.
switched
Okay.
to a different device, so I'm on a phone now, but I can hear you all. I don't know what happened. Thank you.
It's hard to hear on.
Of course, Andy's asked about this a couple times, but kind of what we're talking about a little bit.
And Jamie, you touch upon something that really is the Al Capone approach to enforcement, right? Which is even though Warren has, I think, 2 police officers or 1 police officer leading this building code crossover endeavor where they have a cop showing up to enforce building code, which I think that's it's a lawsuit in itself, right? That's a good declaratory action in itself. But they're essentially showing up to say, I'm a cop in a cop uniform, giving you a cop card, asking you to call me about a building code issue. Well, that's a motivating factor right there, because you're not, the general public isn't seeing that as hey, this is a building code issue, and why is the cop asking me for it? So they're using it that way. And, you know, the building code, building and safety is, let's just say, largely deferred to in terms of the city keeping up health, safety, and welfare of the city. So let's just say they're going to milk that and bang the dark corners of those arguments to get around a lot of the caregiver arguments, right? Because we're going to say, oh, this is we're treating this like a crime, and then be like, oh no, it's all safety and health and making
safety.
sure that making sure no one blows up or burns their house down or all that kind of crap. Warren also has this thing with the CO2, and you have to have fresh air exchange and all these things that let's say you haven't talked to the industry participants to know if they're smart or not.
Well, and that aren't in the state law. So, like, by requiring all this extra shit, they're being more restricted.
That's right. So this is where it gets into the problem of what. Again, I think with the building code issues, they write you a ticket. Now you have standing to sue, right? They've put you in that position. They've created that position. So there's, I don't know if there's a way to go after it, because that, and I guess maybe the declaratory action of saying, look, your police officers aren't here to enforce building code. And, I'd be curious to see what MCOLs or any of the police officers associations would go for. But, I'm sure they have those excuses locked.
What a liability. What a liability. How many of those inspections are actually searches under the 4th Amendment? I mean, if he's acting on behalf of the government and he's a cop and he's, you know what I mean? So, okay, so your inspection is actually a search. Bivens suit, pay me, motherfuckers.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's what it should come down to.
Right. And to me, that says that you have more than enough police officers.
Yep.
And you don't.
So, Attorney Bruce Leach brings up an issue that I've heard about before too. Some judges just blowing off the higher court decision in the Toohey case and still trying to tell people they can't use their medical marijuana on probation or bond or whatever. And so just because you have a ruling doesn't mean you immediately, everything changes right away. Sometimes you have to actually go back into court and say, seriously, this was ruled on.
And to those same judges, they don't care. That's like asking somebody, hey, you're wrong. Reconsider yourself. No, I'm not. All right. Okay, move on. I've had some conversations recently. I mean, it's like, yes, the first answer to that is, okay, give me a ruling and I'm going to and I'm going to appeal it. The other side that I've really tried to, and again, I haven't totally, vetted this out in terms of, seeing if it worked or not, but the idea would be, and this works in other cases, is that you could ask for what they call superintending control, which is you're asking for another court to take control of the case because the judge has gone off the rails, right? And you can make that position, and that is, let's just say, it might be the shorter course to getting another judge to look at it, because for that you might get the judge from the circuit court or a neighboring district court to say, well, of course people v. Toohey applies. Get the fuck out of here, right? And then Now your motion for superintendent control is a much, it's a heavier look. Like motion for superintendent control is a kick in the dick to the judge, like just a real punch in the nose. And especially if you get the new judge to say, duh, dummy, right? This is case law, and why are we even here? That's a bad look, right? That's a let's just say it could be perceived as a worse look, or it looks, more of a scar on that judge than getting overturned in appeals. Appeals happen all the time, right? Superintendent control is, it's the beginning of a bad day for a lot of those people.
Or we just
But
follow case law. It wouldn't be
Right.
an issue.
But this is also where, like in a case like where the judge doesn't want to do it and they're making the attorneys go through it. Now we're getting into the economic challenge and the economic hurdle, which we've seen, and I've seen this in a disgusting amount of time, where it's my clients say, okay, well, I'm out of money. I can't afford to hire an appellate attorney. I can't afford to go forward. All my shot is at the circuit court level, so that, they're not able to continue on. And a judge at this position might be like, oh, you can't use it on, weed on probation. Well, do you have the money to fight me on this? If not, I win. If you do,
So
I win until proven wrong.
that's another reason why that ruling should be codified into law formally on the state level. And we've suggested, instead of 5512, simply make it clear that that decision in TUI is the perspective on this, so that the judges don't have to worry about it. People aren't discriminated against from accessing those specialty courts just because they're medical marijuana patients, and they aren't required to have special hearings or somebody else to make a decision or anything like that as to whether or not they can continue to use their medicine. Just check that in as the way it is, the way that our state is,
Mm-hmm.
and then that solves the problem, and we can move forward. And if you have your card, you're good.
Well, and that's the other side too, is that procedurally speaking, TUI is published, so that good law. The window for the appeal to the Supreme Court, I believe, is passed without a submission. So there is no subsequent challenge. We're not, in this limbo that we used during Tuttle, which is like, ho, Tuttle's in the Supreme Court, let's punt. TUI is good law, and the idea or the position that a judge is not following essentially settled law without a challenge or any other, let's say, collateral interpretation, needs to be more of a deal than, oh, you won't let me use my marijuana on probation. That's the consequence. That's the impact of the decision. The decision is, I'm not following case law. That's where you get superintendent control. That's where you have this a judicial tenure commission problem to be like, look, this isn't,
and something like TUI, a published higher court decision was never granted leave or requested leave for any higher court. It was left there. It was published. That is the law of the land right now.
Right, but
Something like that should be strong enough to prevail. But would we be surprised if we didn't win?
well, you're changing people's beliefs too. These are judges. They believe they know what they're doing, and they believe they have some holier power and some authority. And now you're changing their beliefs because the law is dictating. You just convinced them that Santa Claus wasn't real.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of times they've internalized some of these things. It's just like a totally accepted. There's no like second questioning some of these things.
That's old dogs and new tricks.
So I'm going to get to Dawn Ann here very quickly, and I think we're going to maybe push the conversion oil discussion, because there's like a conspiracy part of that I wish maybe Rick could be around for, that I'd like to get into a little bit for fun. But just briefly though, and particularly since you're here, Paul, can you discuss headlines? And we don't want to take too much time because we want to get to Dawn Ann, but discuss the headlines of the new package of expungement bills.
Oh yeah.
It's 5912 through 5920. It seems like there's some good stuff in there. I know I've discussed a potential issue with Josie on 5912 in terms of like the time periods when somebody would hurt their chances of getting their stuff expunged. I mean, it could be years and years ago they committed a crime. They want to get it expunged, but had some traffic thing, within the last couple of years. Now they got to wait another 5 or something, No.
Yes, and this is the sticky part because the 5912 clarifies the time period required to have elapsed to be eligible for expungements starts from the date of the individual's most recent conviction. So while that is, I believe that's consistent with the interpretation now, it makes it, I don't know if it's going to make it easier, but it should make it easier to say, okay, if you have 5 convictions over 20 years, the answer is you're working with the most recent one first.
So that's good. Is that good?
It's a good thing depending on when your last conviction was. Right.
Okay.
So I've got a scenario now where I have a young lady who's got a conviction from 2 years ago, and she has some from 5 and 10 years prior. So what this means to her, and even it means that now, is that she's not eligible to convict the most recent one because the 5-year period hasn't lapsed, and she can't then get the prior convictions done because the time period hasn't lapsed for those, and she has a conviction since. So we have to do it in reverse order. And I'm doing that now with a lot of clients where you're working with, they have these successive convictions, and you're just working backwards in time, and it's working, but with 6 months to 8 months in between applications, you're getting 2 convictions done in a year.
So does 5912 hurt things, help things, or is it yet known?
I have to see how it's worded, but it could just be a codification of, let's say, the way that the AG and some attorneys understand the law to work. Because the way that I read this is that this is consistent with some practices that I've gone to because of my conversations with the Attorney General's office and said, can we do it this way? And they've said, yeah, that's how we view it too. And so if they codify that, then it would be easier for everybody else to understand how the expungements work.
So we have this potential thing that could be a little quirky, or maybe there's a better way of doing it, and maybe it doesn't cause an issue at all potentially, and it's just
right.
And it's just a way to help facilitate things and clarify some things. But the rest of it doesn't really seem to have an issue at all, and it seems to actually have a lot of sensible improvements.
It's positive practical stuff, and it's positive for the practitioner, but also for the true clean slate people, right? So the people that have sick of carrying their past around with them and having certain things kind of pop up here and there or have the possibility of it. So we talk about 5913, 5917, and 5919, which prohibits the publishing of arrest records in iChat, which is great for all those people that have been arrested and never charged, right? The people that just get picked up, or they are technically arrested and then it just lingers on their record, and then you have to go through the process of destroying fingerprints or whatever it is to destroy the biometric data, and it's just a hurdle. So if it doesn't show up, it doesn't hurt you because you were never charged. There's no point in disclosing that. 5914 prohibits employers from asking about the expungement status of an applicant, which is the continuation of, have you ever been convicted of a felony?
So something doesn't show up on your record anymore, but they go, hey, was your record expunged? You go, yeah, okay, well then, still fuck you then.
Right.
In some cases.
It's still the truth test. And, some of the employers, the government can still ask that question. The U.S. government can ask that question. But that also is going to be sticky in how that handles. So, right, that will at least make it blanket to say you can't ask me about it at all. 5916 requires those eligible for automatic expungement be notified when the record is expunged. So essentially after 23, when the automatic expungements happen, this is suggesting
so 7 years for misdemeanors, 10 years for felonies, and how that works and when it gets implemented is December of 2023 or something like that.
Yeah, 23 sometime. I thought it was May sometime.
Okay, all right. It might be like in halfway through the year, then not at the end of the year.
It's sometime in 23 where they're supposed to start that process of essentially like checking all the records and seeing what's eligible and going forward. The 5918 requires that employers and background check companies use current information within the last 30 days to conduct their checks, which is again fair to the employee, because you go there and say, hey, look, I got my record expunged to get this job, which I deal with a lot. You get a lot of people looking for promotions and they want to clear their record so that their record doesn't hold up the promotion. And then all of a sudden background, the company uses a background check from a year ago or from a half year ago, and it screws them up. 5920 prohibits landlords from asking about the expungement status of applicants. So now we're talking about the
Same concept.
residential. Same
the
concept.
employer,
Residential applications, right?
Yeah.
So those are all very positive in terms of their their intent. But again, like you said, 5912, we have to take a look and see how that's worded, because it could be it could turn a phrase on us that makes it problematic.
So that and in my opinion, not improving on the existing scenario for cannabis.
That's such a, when we met, was it last year, Jamie, when I asked Irwin about that, and Rep. Irwin said that there's really no stomach for criminal justice reform anymore, but he said that there was some resistance to that idea of making certain marijuana felonies eligible under the marijuana misdemeanor laws. And yes, I can see how lawmakers don't want to try to shave things too thin or make things too difficult, but I also think it was a it was a coward's way out.
Yeah, they have the basic concept of excuse behavior before for what we've made legal now.
Yes. I also wonder if there was let's say a numerical practical reason for that. And by numerical, I mean the way that the codes are numbered for the offenses that people were convicted of, right? So if you had 3 ounces, that was the same offense as if you had, a pound ultimately. So that there wasn't a variation, there wasn't a way to through the code that you were convicted of, like with a misdemeanor code, we know that through that code, those are misdemeanors and you're eligible. But under the felony convictions, we didn't know that if you were convicted of being actually compliant with the MMA or being, if there were other factors that made it so that you weren't compliant and at what time your conviction was, so that, you didn't have the benefit of any of the, any of the cases after 2012, it would have created a practical mess, and it would have potentially maybe created the lack of the ability to distinguish between the true caregiver and the true medical patient, and their conviction, and the guy who just gets caught with 10 5-gallon buckets full of pot and doesn't care. Because again, there's no way to look at the code and make that distinction. Those are factual distinctions within the case. That's kind of a problem for the court, because you can't just look and say, okay, MCL 333-7403, you're eligible, you're out of here. They have to look at it and say, okay, well, yes, it's a marijuana offense, so technically we're on the right path. Now let's look down and see what are the facts of the case. I could see a bill, proposed bill that would be, let's say, a part of the expungement package, that you'd have to create more of a factual appeal to say, here are the facts of my case. This is why I'm eligible under current application of the law, right? I was caught with 2 ounces. I wasn't a caregiver. Caught with 2 ounces, charged with a felony. That felony should be removed automatically because of the facts now apply to what's not illegal.
Right.
But we'll see. I mean, I look at it. If Irwin's right, they don't have the stomach for that.
Well, he tried. I mean, he clearly added in the other. So it does. I don't want to get too deeply into it, but are there a couple more on there? Because then no,
that's it.
All right. So and then just briefly, I know there's not a whole lot to say about it, but thoughts on, there is a hold on product right now in the commercial system. I guess it equals about $5 million of value. Is it Sky Labs? Products seem to come from there. And then it also seems to, at least some people say, extrapolate back to a particular cultivator too, and that there's an investigation going on, and it's part of the consequences of that investigation. Is that possibly a Veritas investigation, or should it be assumed as the Veritas investigation, or is it something completely different? Is it a testing issue, or is there some other issue?
Well, I'd be curious to see, because do we know yet as to why they're holding this material?
Well, they put it on hold. It's not a safety issue, I believe. And
they didn't recall it. They just put it on hold.
And
yeah,
I'll tell you what word on the street.
and they won't. I'll just wait a second. You can do that in 1 second.
Yeah.
The CRA or the MRA, whatever the form is that is it in right now, says they won't comment on anything.
Correct.
Because of the ongoing investigation.
And
I just make that, and there's no reason to think there's a Veritas thing other than I just like to shake that up a little bit and know that there's a parallel investigation supposed to be going on at the same time. But go ahead, Adam.
I'm going to tell you that I'm hearing that this is about product that was brought in from out of state.
Bingo.
That was
when you
then
said
run
not a safety issue
and turned into distillate and used in the production of cannabis infused products.
And I've heard people say dirty distillate, and I took that as a testing thing, but I could see this now being applied in that way too. Okay.
But at some point, this was found out that these people were bringing in this weed, and whether the state extrapolated and figured out that, oh, well, if they're doing this and turning it, then we got to stop all their product, or did they get caught doing this one batch? That I have no idea, obviously. But obviously the state figured out that this product can't go to market. I think it's very clear, though, that it's not a safety issue because they would have immediately recalled it, but it doesn't appear that any of this product has made it out. So that's, I think the state kind of tells on themselves by doing the job they do the way they do it. And we all know what's going on in the street because this is the weed game, and nothing's going to change until these legislators realize that they're going to be played a certain way. And this shit happens. And, why is the question? Why is it happening? Is that because the market wasn't here at the time it needed to be and people needed product and they had to get it from somewhere else? Or is it greed because you could get it super cheap from California because they have an abundance, and $2-3 a gram less makes all the difference in the world when you're selling hundreds of thousands of units?
Yeah. And this is predictable too. I had this conversation last year about hey, watch all this product come in from out of state, and all of a sudden your processors are going to be, extracting 40-50% rather than 10 to 15%. And there's going to be this big mystery because there was always this talk too in the last couple of years about hey, how'd you get 20,000 pounds of Caregiver product into the system? If you did the math, that's 100 years of every caregiver in the state.
Yeah, then they blame that those issues. What issues did happen back on caregivers again? It was it was a standard caregiver that snuck in 7,000 pounds.
Yeah. Fuck.
Hey, so
you couldn't see that it was California pot from across the room, right? We can all see West Coast weed from across the room.
So the investigation is likely about some distillate that was switched out in the metric system for something that came in from somewhere else, possibly for something else. We don't know. There's no thoughts on it.
2,500 liters or something to that extent. I mean, Adam, did you hear a number on
$5 million of value? Is what I've heard
of product.
2,500 liters. That's a lot.
It is.
I don't know. Perspective, right?
The reality is it's all about scale, and some of these guys are trying to step up their scale without having the local product to do so, and they've been doing this since the get. I mean, before the legal market existed, we were smoking Cali packs. Okay, there were guys set up at farmers markets that had nothing but Cali packs, a dozen of them, different packs, fresh, and as much of it as you could want. Now, you can't tell me that isn't going on today in the regulated market somewhere, somehow. I mean, these guys are duplicating metric tags. They've been caught doing it, companies already. And if one guy's doing it,
that's a thing? Actually just recreating the tag so that
bogus information. Duplicating, registering things, all kinds of crazy stuff. And don't forget, everyone thinks that these companies are under 100% video surveillance. They are not. they are being recorded 100% of the time. Somebody would have to go through and look. And the problem is this. Unlike the shooter in New York or whatever it was the other day on the subway, there's not somebody following somebody that just committed a crime. They have no idea where to look if they're looking, and they don't look. They don't even scan these things. All they do is wait for somebody to violate and it be known, and then they go back and they look from that point forward. So if an owner, and I only put this on the owners because I can't imagine anybody would risk their boss's license but the boss. If an owner decides to walk in the middle of the night with duffel bags full of whatever, nobody knows, because nobody's going to see that on the video. I mean, that's as simple as it could be. Then there's the guys with the computer systems that can go in and make changes. So this happens in industry. We all know that. And it happens in this game too. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the system that they're making it out to be. You know, they think the video surveillance is the answer. Because they think, the legislators thought that was a good idea, right? I mean, what industry has the type of video surveillance that the marijuana industry has? Or the cannabis industry, excuse me. No industry.
Right. By regulation, no one. But
by regulation, right. Now, I will tell
gas
you,
stations maybe, but not by
my
regulation.
friends in the casino industry know that every inch of their life is covered by camera. But that's the boss. That's the eye in the sky. That used to be a dude on a plank walking through the ceiling looking through a grate. Now it's a camera in every corner. That's okay. We get that. We expect that from the boss, but not from the government.
Well, so we're gonna have to wait to get some more information on this, but it seems like a lot of people are focusing on the distillate story. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. If there's a conclusion to this investigation and what the facts are and what the consequences may be.
Well, and didn't the whatever they're calling themselves now, the MRA, did they announce that they're now going to publish fines differently than they used to? That they're actually going to create a list now, right?
Rick said something like that on the last show, and they did send him some other information that I think was publicly available, but they just haven't really put it right. They didn't put it out there that easily. Yeah,
or whatever.
Yeah.
And,
disciplinary action reports.
right.
They should be monthly.
That's awesome. That I will tell people. I want to tell all the viewers, when those things start happening, start reading them. They're great. All that shit's great. And I would even tell you, and no offense, counselor, but I would even tell you, read the Attorney Grievance Commission publication.
Always.
Oh, dude, every lawyer in town reads that shit. I
the first thing I read
about people I know. You'd be surprised what's on there. So,
oh yeah, it's the first thing I read with that bar journal. Who fucked up? But I tell you what, to your point, and actually the whole point of that is it's sort of like the like you're playing with your brothers and your brother gets smacked, so now you know what not to do. Right? It's the same thing for lawyers, where it's like the lawyers will read that and be just like, holy shit, Bob got pinched for doing this. Well, I'm fucking not doing that anymore, right?
Right,
and then,
anymore,
right. And the same way goes where it's like, if you start watching, and I think this is the point with the MRA, is to say, if we start releasing all of these, the list of dings and the list of fines, and the smart manager is going to review all that with their employees and say, look at the example of all these ding dongs that got, tagged for something,
right?
And don't do that dumb shit. Right? It's like, let's call it case law, right? Learn from it.
Rick pointed out that there were two $250 fines. And I, as a guy that used to run one of those businesses where I had to counsel my employees about what to do and what not to do, and what other places were getting arrested for, I could see every dispensary in the state sitting down their employees and saying, listen, these two employees got popped for $250 a piece because they made this mistake.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't you let that happen to you. because that's a ding on my license.
And you also
That's your
discussed
compliance guy jobs.
$225,000 fines
Yeah.
for each
Mhm.
MRTMA and MFLA license. So, so we're going to have to see what comes next, but that's, interesting stuff in the current headlines of CRA investigations and what's going on out there.
County Road Association?
Yeah.
That's what CRA is, isn't it? And that's the thing is, like, if you Google CRA, and if you Googled CRA when Michigan CRA, if you Google it on the data that came out, Michigan County Road Association. So hopefully there's no confusion at the Lansing level of where your hearings will be or where your licenses come from.
Wait till people figure out that cannabis and marijuana are the same thing.
Hey, so we've been, man, it's taken a long time, and Dawn, I appreciate your patience and hope that you've been okay hanging out.
I'm on the mend, man. I'm happy to be here, and I enjoy the show.
Right on. But I'm really happy that you're here too, and been trying to kind of have you on for a while here and there, and finally came together for today. So thank you very much. And you have a few things to discuss, and I think a lot of people can find some value in your testimonial and understanding of why that results in a lot of the work that you've been doing and that kind of stuff, and to let people know about that, and please feel free to let people know about your journey as a patient, what you do as a caregiver, the organizations that you founded, the work that you do. Just take the floor and introduce yourself.
Well, I'm from Michigan. My name is Dawn, and 2014 I had multiple breast cancers, and I did chemo, and I didn't do radiation, but I did a lot of cannabis oil, and I did have reduction in my tumor size before I had my double mastectomy from the ultrasound biopsy where they were measured. So I ate the shit out of oil because I had a very generous donation, and so because the Michigan cannabis community is amazing. So luckily, I'm 8 years out and haven't had an issue, and I'm helping cannabis patients, cancer patients, breast implant illness patients, kind of still chugging along, trying to work on my health, but helping a lot of different people. And I do have my website, firstlightofhealingway.com, first light, like Dawn, firstlightofhealingway.com. And that's more for me to refer people to. I don't feel good a lot from different, between chemo and breast implants and whatever. I have different health issues. And so when I don't feel great and I have somebody that is in need of information, right now, and is how you feel when you're in those situations, I can refer them to the website. And but we've been doing a lot of fun things, and now we're working on breast implant informed consent legislation here in Michigan too. But we have House Bill 5880 and House Bill 5881 that are just in the health committee right now, but we're hoping that we'll just keep on moving through with good support. And
explain what they do. I was actually muted before. I was trying to talk to you, but thank you for just keeping it going and bringing up more stuff. And I know that you've been working on legislation that has to do with the issues surrounding breast implants and stuff like that. And if you want to, those are the bill numbers, but what they do and who's introduced them and stuff like that. Please describe that stuff.
Well, Representative Julie Calley, who is from my hometown in Ionia County, she introduced these bills with Karen Whitsett and Jeff Yarrock. And there's two different bills just because of the way the public health code is set up. But so far, we seem to have great support, and I'm just looking forward to this happening, just because I have a lot of people in breast cancer groups that are coming out fresh diagnosis, and they're not being told still that there might be some implications to their health from having breast implant reconstruction, which for me was worse than my cancer and a whole year of chemo, which was shocking. So, I think the bill will help save lives and help the quality of life, just people knowing, even if they make the choice to have them, because I'm all about choice, and who doesn't like boobs? Let's admit it. But, I want people to know that there are chances that they might get sick. And if they do get sick, they know to look into it. Doesn't mean it's going to be that, but it could be. So, yeah, we've been working over a year with women from other states. And then we have a whole team here in Michigan of cool women that are, have a certain field that they're all in, that they excel in. And so we have a wonderful team, and I think it's going to happen and be a law here in Michigan.
Very cool.
Right on.
Dawn, I'm curious. You said Jeff Yarok was part of bringing the legislation forward. He
Yes.
is not a friend to the cannabis community. I know he's actually my representative, and he is the enemy as far as cannabis reform goes. How have you had conversations with that guy? Has he?
Well, we've
enlightened
talked
his
to
perspective?
all the reps pretty much, but surprisingly, he joined on when Julie introduced it. So, I was kind of surprised, and I'm thankful for the support, obviously. But yeah, I did know that, and like I said, I was surprised that he even stepped forward. So I'm thankful.
Yeah, I wonder what his angle is. That's well, hey, whatever it is, at least it's helping bring this legislation forward. That's cool.
Well, and almost everybody knows somebody that has breast cancer, or their wife, their grandma, their mom, their daughter. So I think that really hits home with a lot of people and state representatives as well. So,
well, speaking of that, Julie Calley is one of the lead introducers of 5512. So I mean,
yes,
takes a departure, and from our view, but
right.
again, we'll accept the support on something that we can agree with.
Yeah.
Well, again, we got to find out why, because we know there's a lot of horse trading. So a lot of this stuff is, very subjective, if you ask me.
Politics.
Yep.
Transactional.
Not that supporting something
Yeah.
like what Don's talking about wouldn't be a natural for many people, as you mentioned, because of some connection. I mean, that's something that you're not going to get any grief for supporting.
Right. I'd hope not, and luckily it's passed unanimously in Arizona already. And we've had good support in other states too. So hopefully we'll just have good support. I don't really care at this point with these bills passing. I just want support. And, unfortunately, not everybody's going to support the cannabis industry the way that I think that they should. But, we're grateful for the support and hope that these bills move along and help others. And, as far as cannabis, I've been at the Capitol, obviously, like you guys have probably been at the Capitol with different bill actions and things through the years and getting things done. So I appreciate everybody's advocacy.
Is there an admission on the behalf of manufacturers of implants and maybe those who facilitate them being used, that they do cause problems? Do they themselves admit that there's these issues at this point?
Yeah, at this point, the FDA is constantly changing their website and updating to different acknowledgments, breast implant illness, increase in symptoms of autoimmune disease, cognitive decline, fatigue, an actual cancer that's caused right from a breast implant. It's not even a breast cancer. It's a whole separate cancer that's killed women already just from having those breast implants. And even years after they've had them out, because some doctors like to leave this capsule behind. It kind of holds the breast implants in. It's a natural defense that your body does. And so if you have a rupture or a leak in that implant, or it's just defective for whatever reason, if it's a saline implant, it could be full of mold, bacteria. Kind of like when you see a bucket or a container outside that sits in the sun all summer and you see little floaties floating around in it after a while. That's kind of what those breast implants look like. And so between that and then the silicone, and all of them have a silicone shell, that capsule kind of holds some bad stuff in there if anything happens to creep out or gel bleed. And so some people have had problems where they've left the capsule and they end up getting more and more sick. And so we just want to make sure that people do a proper explant and get the capsules out. And there's a lot of gaslighting in the community, and I see it more and more coming into the news, not just women with breast implants for whatever reason, whether they had cancer or augmentation, but people are speaking out, and I think it's helping others speak out and help with their health issues, getting their implants out. So anyways, yes. And, and if anybody wants to get on our legislative team, we're going to be doing testimony. I see there's a comment there at the Capitol at some point. They can look me up on Facebook, or they can look me up at firstlighthealingway.com. With the crack of dawn on Facebook, send me a message and I'll hook up with you. And if you need resources or information, or if you just want to go to the Capitol and tell these state representatives how much it's impacted your life, I'll connect with you and we'll make something happen.
Yeah, testimonials, of course, as we've used that with our issue many times, and that's part of that process. And for sure, on this issue, that would make a lot of sense if there are people willing. It's not always easy, obviously, but there are some people kind of willing to share their personal story and and help to explain why this is a good idea. And,
yeah, hopefully, I can't see why somebody'd vote against it. It's kind of covering the plastic surgeon's ass too, saying, hey, this patient knew she gets sick, she signed this, and she knew that these implants might cause that. So then it's not suing them.
So they're being made like right now. Somebody's choosing to get one. They're being made like very much in the exact same way that people had them used years ago.
Yes, and there's more and more FDA information leaking out from 30 years ago, how they called, a cancer, a condition caused by implants. A lot of bullshit has leaked out. Just, just like cannabis information, there's a lot of lies. And a lot of that information is coming out publicly, and they're acknowledging, they're making light of it on their website. So at least there's a black box warning, and, women should get that, but a lot of them don't see it because they're actually, they're presented at surgery, so they're not even usually conscious. So having this law will make sure that the doctors actually follow through.
Are there any kind of implants that are less risky or that have been designed to significantly reduce risk?
Not at this point. They just actually are bringing a new one to the market, trying to say it's some silk texture, which it's a textured one, which those are the ones that are more likely to cause the BIA ALCL, which is a cancer caused just from the implant. And they're already seeing these, not even a couple of years out, rupturing. So they don't even sound like they're very good products. So they're coming out with different angles to get implants to women still. And I think a lot of places maybe aren't placing the textured as much, but some doctors aren't placing them at all anymore because they did see how much people would get sick, and then they'd get better when they had them out. So there's not really a safe implant. Sorry, everybody. I mean, there's butt implants, cheek implants. There's all kinds of implants, and if they're made with these silicone shells, all of them can be toxic and cause, different issues, even that you already had to flare up. And it's hundreds of thousands of women that it's been affected, and not just women. There's transgender community as well that are affected by this as well. So,
yeah. Man, that's rough. Well, I'm glad that given the circumstances that you decided to dedicate time and energy and education and help to make some, affect change substantially. especially if we get these things passed.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
you know, some people might not get sick, but it's kind of a game of Russian roulette, you know, with something in your body like that. So, and yeah, I appreciate you letting me get the word out too.
Sounds like it happens too much, you know. I mean,
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people get told, well, you're getting older, you know, oh, you got 3 kids, oh, you know, you probably need more sleep. And just a lot of different things get blamed on age. You know, I had chemo, so a lot of that was all, oh, this is your new normal. And my blood pressure, it was like 200 over 100, and then 210 over 110. And for over 5 years, my blood pressure was stroke worthy. And we didn't know why. And they did all these different tests and misdiagnoses. And then I get the breast implants out because I'm having so many spasms and back pain and moving ribs. And by the time I have the next surgery, I have to have a couple injections when I get out of surgery because my blood pressure is so low. So I took myself off 4 different blood pressure medications because I knew my cardiologist would not apply for it. And I took them off the same way I went on, you know, and I tapered off. And so now I'm on lisinopril and I still see my cardiologist, but my blood pressure is pretty much like 110 over 60, 100 over 60 now with that lisinopril, which, you know, 200 over 100 for somebody that's like $115, you know, I weigh about 115. That's not a cool blood pressure for anybody, man. So I feel like that alone, my body was fighting, or, you know, inflamed. You know, I think inflammation, it truly is a silent killer. And some of these breast implants, you know, a lot of these groups, some of them delete the bad stories, you know, or the comments that say, hey, you know, my breast implants made me sick. It's kind of a wicked web. There's a lot of big name doctors out there too that support different things. And so that's all I'm going to say about that.
That's amazing, Don. You know, I'm a survivor of testicular cancer. And it's funny when you bring up about the implants, you know, breast implants, but, you know, I rejected the testicular implant they wanted to give me just because I didn't want anything to do with having, you know, inserting something into my body that was foreign. And I just said, I'll forego it. And,
good
you
for
know,
you. I'm so thankful that you didn't get it.
Yeah.
They're tough decisions no matter what, but, you know, they're finding more and more that it just causes different, you know, autoimmune and just different systemic and neurological issues too. I have a lot of cognitive problems now. And you know, I can't speak the way I used to speak or read the way I used to read. I hope that you don't have those symptoms, but I think, you know, I think the breast implants made me worse. I felt great when I got out of chemo. You know, I was eating my cannabis oil every day, still do. And then I just kind of went downhill until I got those breast implants out.
That's amazing. Yeah. With mine, you know, I lucked out. I did not have to do chemo. They basically did the surgery. They said, had I waited 3 weeks longer, it would have spread through my lymph nodes and it would have been a mess. So I caught it literally just like right at the last second. But I thank God I did not have to do the chemo. That was scarier to me than the actual cancer itself. Was chemo.
And Don, do your doctors know that you're using cannabis oil along with chemotherapy?
Well, you know, I talked to them all along when I was going through chemo. I refused the tamoxifen and everything. So I just always have done cannabis oil the whole 8 years. But when I was in there, different doctors were receptive. Others were really not receptive and would even say, that might be causing your headaches. You know, okay, I'm going through chemo. I have 4 different kinds of breast cancer. I'm having the toxic you know, the cocktail that they got all their hazmat suit on, basically giving it to me. And you're going to blame the cannabis for my headache.
Yeah. It's kind of like those driving reports from Colorado where the person was drunk and on all types of shit and whatever. And then there's some cannabis also there. And then somehow cannabis was must have been the car.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, I kind of filtered out my doctors who would get it. And, you know, I had oncology nurses that were amazing. They'd even shut the door and they'd ask me questions. So how's it going with your nausea? Do you find it helps your nausea a lot? You know, other patients are asking me about it. And so I will say that the oncology nurses were much more receptive to it than the actual oncologist that I work with. I left that oncologist and went somewhere else. And, I always hear, keep on doing what you're doing.
Right.
That's a cannabis code from the specialist.
It's amazing how much misinformation. I had a similar issue with nausea. I use it because basically the opiates that the VA poisoned me with, it screwed the nerve up in my stomach. So I always get nauseous. And of course you explain to the doctor, hey, I'm taking cannabis. And they say, well, that's the cause of your nausea, because they think of things like cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. And they think of these, they're just ignorant. They have no idea of what's going on. So that's really cool. You're able to have the conversation with the oncology, at least even if it was on the nurse end of things, to at least get some feedback. I mean, there's got to be some compassion there with the relationship that you have with these medical professionals, and they have to have, sympathy to the choices that you're making to help heal yourself. I mean, it's either that or chemo, right?
Right.
So,
right. Well, the best thing was, actual patient testimony. The first week I went in there for chemo, they gave me, I think it was Compazine and Zofran, and they give you this little mix. And man, I took that and I thought there was like a devil coming out of my stomach. I lost 13 pounds my first infusion, and I'm a pretty small frame chick, and so again, I had donations of edibles, and I started with 100 milligram bear before I went in. I brought one into Sparrow during my infusion, and I had one when I went home, and I went to sleep and felt good. And I put on that 13 pounds. I had an appetite like I was eating RSO too. So I definitely got my appetite back, and they were amazed. And so I quit taking the anti-nausea meds and did CBD joints, which were different, not something that I had indulged in before. And then I just smoke a regular joint, but the edibles made a huge difference. So for a doctor to say that blankly, it affects everybody differently, but with cancer groups and other people I know, the testimonies about what helps them between CBD products and, just full RSO, real cannabis oil, whatever you want to call it, proof's in the pudding. So doctors can say what they want. They just need to be more educated, and hopefully that will be coming with some kind of federal deschedulation.
Well, I actually have a primary care physician that's a Wayne State professor also, and he is very, very pro cannabis. Actually, he's Lebanese American, so he understands the history of hashish in his homeland and the medicinal values of it. And I can't tell you, I spend more time talking weed with him when I go to his office than we do about my health. But just having a guy that understands that, I use copious amounts of cannabis in all kinds of forms. Every time I go to him with an issue, he always asks, well, are you doing anything for it on your end? Well, yeah, of course I am, but it still hurts. So let's get an x-ray, because that's what you do. And he's a real open-minded, gets it kind of guy. And I found that just having that connection with a doctor makes the treatment better. I mean, you're much more informed. So,
Absolutely.
But he's also like to do some phase 3 studies, which I think, Jamie, I was going to hit you up about. He's real interested in getting some studies done with cannabis and cannabis products and getting it published and, moving forward. So This is a local guy in Madison Heights. I mean,
Nice. And he's learning all along with you. So that's great. It's going to help somebody else that he deals with that wants to use cannabis as well.
So Donna, for 8 years of using oil, and in the last 8 years is fairly decent time for there being good, decent product made with good bud and your access to that and all that kind of stuff. Have you homed in on some types of cannabis to use for your oil that works with you better than other things? Over the years, have you narrowed stuff down to like something that you jive with, or has all of it been beneficial to you?
Well, multifaceted. I think somebody else was saying, I've used the topicals, I use everything. And But the oil, I try to take oil on a regular basis. And then, I like the capsules, various extractions. People have taken all these and seen tumor reduction or getting rid of tumors. So, I know RSO is like my holy grail, or real cannabis oil, but the capsules, different extractions for patients have great results as well. And so I utilize all of them, and I just feel blessed, to be able to have places I can get them, and know that if I need to, I can make them as well.
And use like all of them. So like get a wide range of, I mean, of
I'm
course, all
losing
the.
you.
Okay, yeah, use all of them, meaning like you benefit from the major components of the oil on the surface, and then you add to that a wide range of all the other components, because you can work with like many different things. Or some people are more sensitive and might need some specific things or something like that. But I'm not sure if you're with us here. Don might be frozen for a second here.
Yep. I think we're frozen.
That's all right. That happens. We'll
Yeah.
figure it out in a second. But yeah, this is pretty. There are some intensities here. Here we go. And let me see if this works. All right. Hopefully that's a little bit better. You there? I don't think you're muted. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Man, we can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Nope.
Gotta love technology.
Yeah, that
Fickleness
sucks.
in technology, bro.
Yeah, hopefully that gets figured out, because it's intense, but it's really interesting. And I know that her story, I mean, there's a broader issue of using cannabis with cancer, right on the surface there. She also has been through the whole breast implant stuff, and I know that's something that a lot of people have had to kind of deal with, and have had different levels of good information on, and sources to connect with on it. Are you there now?
I don't
Yeah.
know what kind of voodoo is going on here.
You are there, but I think I was just commenting on how you can benefit from like the oil, as long as it's decent, good oil, and you haven't decided that a particular kind is inside. So maybe there's some good areas for connection, bad areas for connection. You're walking through those.
I think, Jamie, what you mentioned, though, the big thing is good oil, right? Like, there's so many people that just don't know what they're doing, and that's where the education portion comes, because oil is, you can teach someone to make oil fairly easily, but it's learning how to grow good enough product to be able to actually come out with good oil. I mean,
I've seen that whole process kind of dramatically change over the last 10, 15 years, I guess. No,
the old rice cooker. Now they've advanced from the rice cooker to they got all kinds of contraptions.
Well, I mean, people were using naphtha, because that's what Rick Simpson used originally.
Well, and worse than that, they were using American naphtha. It's different than what Rick Simpson was using in Canada.
Benzene or something in there.
They have put an additive in it in America so that you don't ingest it. Just like your codeine comes with Tylenol, so you can't smash it up and shoot it. So they're going to poison you with a known toxin.
I guess it is used for extracting essential oils, or it has been anyway. I'm not sure. I'm no expert on it, but I think that was probably what led Rick Simpson to it, because what do we use for extractions on plants? And I guess you cook it out and all that kind of stuff, and there's stuff that's worked for people that way.
If it's done properly, and that's the thing with oil. If oil is made properly, the quality is not necessarily that important. And when I say that, what I mean is, if you had low quality bud and you extracted the oil from it, it's not unhealthy oil.
Yeah, you have a
It's
low
just-
yield maybe, but it's
Correct. It might
but
be
now
low
it's the
yield,
extraction,
it might,
right?
but the product won't be poor. It might not be as good as other product, and that's an issue. But the reality is that oil made properly is always good oil. It's finding that real high percentage that you may want if you're trying to treat your cancers and whatnot. But there's a market, there's a retail market on the rec side, I believe, for RSO, and it doesn't have to be this crazy stuff that we're using to kill cancer cells either. Don't forget, and Paul will tell you because he's an old man, there used to be a time when Americans were regularly smoking 7, 8, 12% THC weed because that's all there was coming out of Mexico and South America.
That's the argument of like, this ain't your grandpa's pot, this ain't your dad's pot. That's where
Yeah,
it
but
all
that
comes
doesn't
from.
matter.
Right.
Some of that shit's just
Which-
as good as anything that's 30%.
No, that's
Because
exactly
that
right.
number doesn't make a
Which
difference.
now we understand has more to do with the terpenes than it does with
Right.
the cannabinoids. So, we understand the synergy there, which also means that if anybody's got any of them old seeds, we'd really like to be able to, bring some of that stuff back. But,
Yeah, I hope Don comes back in, man. That was so interesting. Well, here we go. Oh, maybe not. Could just be like the connection in the area or something. I don't know, man. That's I'm glad we got some time in. I'm kind of upset now that I took so long. Here we go. Let's see if this works.
Come back.
Are you there?
Holy shit, I think I am. I got an old laptop. I don't know what was going on. I kept on losing my Wi-Fi. But yeah, how's it going?
Good. I'm glad you were able to make it back because now I was feeling bad about how long it took to start having the conversation with you just to be able to have it cut short. But I'm glad you made it back.
Yeah, I was going to say earlier, if it's okay, that, with breast cancer, a lot of times we find that, my primary cancer was HER2 positive. And so HER2 and triple negative tend to like a little bit of THC compared to estrogen positive or hormone positive breast cancer. They like a little bit more of a higher CBD ratio in the oil. Some women that have estrogen positive cancer would find that it wasn't working is what they were thinking. Well, it wasn't the right ratio. And so we give them a little more CBD and we'd find that they'd be doing well. I clean PET scans, which is amazing to me. But yeah, so breast cancer is a little bit different, and I have helped people with different things, breast, prostate, different things, but I'm not as well versed in all those different cancers. But breast cancer, there's a lot of different variables with the hormone, with triple negative or HER2. And yeah, you get different ratios and it's amazing. You can dial it right in where a patient that was going in and having dirty PET scans has clean PET scans. What's better than that?
So when you have that, do you discuss like continuing to use the oil from that point on? What a lot of people refer to as the maintenance.
Yes, preferably. I'd tell everybody, I want to be on a maintenance dose for life. So I don't know. I think everybody should do it if you can. If you can't, see if I can get my hat on right there. There we go. If you can't, if you have to take a break or whatever and get back on it, I just can't recommend it more.
Have you gotten into the raw juicing?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
DJ, he was really good about doing cannabis leaves, doing the juices and cleaning all that up. And we put them in ice cube trays and freeze them. And so they still go in my smoothies every day. And it lasts a long time.
So when I have some cannabis juice, like I just to, not that it's a big deal. I think many people here can relate. I can smoke joints all day long. Yes, I'm going to get high or something, but I'm not going to be dysfunctional at any point or, not be able to continue to do whatever I want to do. But if I have some cannabis juice, and then I smoke a little bit, I have to stop smoking the joint halfway through. And I call it like high school stony. It's like getting back to that really high feeling that's hard to duplicate once you get really used to it, you know.
Dude, I want to try that.
That whole
I don't know if that
ensemble
happens
effect.
for everybody, but that's definitely what happens to me. I love just the
I'll
raw
give it
juice.
a
I like
shot.
using a you know, like a press for it, something that would work for like wheatgrass or something. So you know, and then just a lot of times a juice, maybe mango juice, because obviously there's a connection there with, you know, just to take that bitterness off, and it just, you get a nice uplifting feeling and get really fucking stoned, you know.
Yeah, and it's good at a cellular level. So I mean, how can you
Lots of
complain
great
about
stuff
that?
in it, right?
You
For
know,
sure.
yeah, people are a health nut.
Yeah.
You know, they don't know what they're missing if they're not juicing their cannabis, getting into it.
It's like back with COVID. Remember the whole juiced cannabis? They were finding that there was some it would inhibit the COVID from entering your body or something like that with the CBD, the raw CBD juice though, and the raw THCA, and there was some news about that. I never heard anything back, but I mean, there's a lot of health benefits that just have not been accounted for yet, and
Yeah, people eat the leaves as salad. I mean, you get the same thing, although you're getting it with the fiber, and your body's got to work for it. But you know, the point of juicing sometimes is to just have access directly to the nutrients without having to immediately absorb it, without having to deal with getting through the fiber. But obviously, sometimes you want that.
Yeah,
But
good stuff.
Yeah. Years ago, this guy named Ken Byer from the west side of the state, who also introduced some new testing, which, you know, early on, which got into things past the cannabinoid profile and into some of the terpenes and stuff like that. It's a weird technology at the time. We couldn't get composition, but we could see what was inside the plant. You could see that, you know, it had THC and other cannabinoids. You could see it had limonene or neuralidil or whatever the major terpenes were and stuff like that. And he was really into the juicing. And we had a big meeting up at Third Coast Custom, which is my brother's body shop in Oscoda, Michigan. And at that time, Representative Calton was there. Robin Schneider was there. Ben Horner was even there that day. Tom Levine was there. And Ken Byer showed up with some of that juice and poured some out for a lot of people. And it was pretty cool. My stepmother, who wants nothing to do with cannabis, you know, really was there, drank some of that, you know, thought it was reasonable. I think he cut it with a little bit of orange juice or something like that. You know, again, take that little bitterness off. But anyway, that was.
It's not the tastiest just to shoot her
No.
down, just regular old cannabis juicing. But you know, you can shoot it down like anything else. It tastes bad.
But anyway, so there can't be any doubt that, I mean, your testimonial in part is cannabis is a big part of the way that you deal with it. It is a big part of how you treat yourself, you know, based on your conditions and stuff like that.
Yeah, I still have a bag in my bedroom drawer, and it's just a bunch of drugs. I got to take it down to the police station, turn it in, but it's a bunch of drugs I don't take anymore that I was prescribed because, you know, I just use different forms of cannabis for so many
stave
different
off
things.
all the side symptoms or whatever, all the side effects. And
Yeah, because there's meds I have to be on, like the lisinopril, you know, there's a couple of things, but not a bag. I mean, it was ridiculous when I was getting out of chemo, thinking I was doing good. You know, they wanted me on just like 10 different medications. Fuck that. Can I say that?
Yes.
Fuck that.
For a lot of people, I remember Antoinette, you know, I remember very distinctly when she was, you know, Antoinette Sarfo Q, former Fox 2 morning news anchor. And just the point is discussing when she realized that cannabis was helping, whereas all this other shit she was taking, which she said it was insured and everything, but she said it equaled about $100,000 of medicine throughout the year for her condition, and it was, you know, I guess minimally having an effect, but she figured out that cannabis worked and was just almost upset that it was that, you know, it was that simple compared to all that other bullshit.
Lied to. You feel cheated. That's how I felt, you know, when I first got into the cannabis, trying it, like I was lied to my entire life, and it actually, it made me resentful.
Don't forget, she was one of the liars.
So I'm thinking about
She was a reporter. She was one of those people that put those fake studies and stuff that became news over the last 50 years. Not that she's been in the game that long, but you know, I would feel super betrayed if my body taught me something that I'd been telling stories about and my government been lying about. I mean,
you know, she says that Richard, her husband, was very encouraging to her. Like, you know, you should really try this. A lot of people are benefiting from it in different ways. There's, you know, and that was the encouragement.
Yeah, I see, you know, helping cancer patients and anybody else that helps sick people. It's like you see miracles every day. You know, if somebody just even has a better quality of life, to me, that's a miracle in itself, because, you know, that's what it's all about. It's quality of life.
I like that word. It's actually, I'm not a believer in anything except myself, but I tell the doctors all the time that I've been in the weed game so long, I've seen miracles, and it's the miracles that they tell me about that they've seen as doctors, where they sent you home and you did your thing with your oils and whatnot, and you came back, and the next scan, those tumors were gone. And these doctors can't explain that. And they want to tell you that all kinds of things happen on all kinds of. It was
because of their experimental chemo, you know, 6 weeks ago. That must have jumped in, and, you know, I've seen reports.
Yeah, what do you say to the people that aren't doing the chemo?
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly right. See, and and these guys all hear that, they see that. These people know that. And I'm like, you can't explain it. And that's the miracle of cannabis. I mean, there's a lot of this stuff that we can't explain, you know. We're learning, we're figuring it out. Technology is getting to the point where we're going to know a lot more now than we would have if we would have legalized years ago, because we weren't there yet, you know. I mean, the technology is really one of the things that's going to help us more than anything, and we're there now. So I'm excited for the future. It's unfortunately we have to teach the misgivings, reteach the misgivings of the past, and re-educate these people. But
yeah, like Jen says in the comments, you know, it's small towns, you know, it's saying no to having provisioning centers. It really sucks for cancer patients, Crohn's patients, epilepsy.
And restricting caregivers in their own homes, too.
Yeah,
I mean, going for a lot of activity, you know.
As we talked about earlier, it's yet to be enforced.
You know, so we all just keep on doing what we got to do.
Bring it on.
It's just cannabis, and
arrest me for weed.
To allow it to happen doesn't cause any problems, and actually causes a lot of good. To restrict it could really hurt some people and not really benefit anybody. So,
right.
The big lie that the prohibitionists like to tell is we don't have enough research. There's not enough research. We can't tell you whether it's healthy or whether it's good or bad. And wow, how silly are they looking that as the research is being conducted, it's good. Holy shit, people are you said better quality of life. I mean, how do you refute that? I mean, what are they going to do at the end of the day?
We are the human trials, you know, whether they want to look at us or not. You know, we are here, and we all have a testimony that we can, you know, tell them.
I've been saying that lately with that Virtus thing, that listen, we've been testing cannabis by machine for 20 years in the game. We've been testing cannabis for 1,000 years, but with human bodies. Okay? Smoke your moldy weed, smoke your pesticides. Where are the bodies? Yeah, people get sick. We know that. We know what moldy weed looks like. We know when weed isn't processed properly. We get that. So don't tell me that you're not going to smoke weed that's not tested, because there are people out there like that would never smoke weed that wasn't tested. I mean,
must be new to the game.
Right. Learn what you're doing before you do it, children. Come on. So, sorry. I get a little animated about that.
Yeah, don't, you know, Biden, I need to start trolling him. He's got too much shit going on, but I was, you know, remember trolling him for the cancer moonshot, you know, cancer moonshot.
Yeah.
What the hell happened to that? You know, I was trolling him about cannabis left and right. You know, I'm sure other people were too. And, you know, crickets.
He was trying to have his Kennedy moment. Didn't happen. Didn't work out as planned. Yeah,
nope. Didn't.
There's so much more to cancer. It's like going to Mars to a certain extent. Like there's just so much we don't know about it. And I think the one thing like the pandemic, you know, that comes out of these emergencies is these great technologies kind of get established, and they're going to be a leaping platform to some of the technology of the future, especially when it comes to cancer. When I had my cancer, I was lucky enough. I was in Boston, so I got to have my surgery at Brigham and Women's, and then I went to Dana-Farber Cancer Center after, and like
Nice.
just to see those folks and the way they operate as some of the best doctors in the world, it's almost exciting to see where we're going, and hopefully at some point we can get to the point where you can snuff it out with a vaccine or there's a magic bullet treatment. And until then, cannabis, at least it's an option for people that have no other options. Why would we?
And it also, for many people, fit the description as the magic bullet, man. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
it's remarkable the
Seriously.
turnaround.
Mhm.
Well, you know, as far as caregivers go and people that help cannabis patients, I haven't really thought deeply about what the percentage is, but so many people get a hold of you, even after, like, say you talked to them 3 years ago about it, and then you don't hear from them. Well, now hospice is coming in. Do you got something that, you know, maybe we can, you know, that makes it tough, but you know what? You can still make their quality of life better.
Mhm.
But, you know, that there's a high percentage of that happens. And if people could just kind of get over the stigma and do a little research, that's the biggest thing. Do your own research. And, you know, you see pictures of grandpa that is sleeping and he looks sickly, and then I give him edibles, and next thing you know, they're sending me pictures of grandpa sitting in the chair and listen, you know, everybody's listening to grandpa telling a story with a smile on his face. You know, people just need to jump into it a little sooner. You know, do the research.
Yep.
And just do it.
Be proactive about your own health. Get your colonoscopies, get the chest scans, get the blood panels. Like, be proactive, and if some of the stuff, if it's caught early, it's not a death sentence, even with some of the more crazy types of cancer. So it's like just taking a proactive approach to your own health, having that, you know, gumption, I guess, to go out. And even if it's bad news, I get nervous about blood work just because I'm worried some shit's going to come back and it's going to be bad, right? So I notice, I haven't gone and gotten my blood work this month. I got to go do that, because if something's wrong, we want to catch that shit as quickly as we can.
Yes. Yep.
Right on. So cool.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of feelings when you feel lumps wherever it is on your body for whatever kind of cancer. And so I know the feeling where you're like, this seems like shit. Probably is shit.
Yeah.
Eventually I'll go in and get told it's shit.
Yeah.
But you got to get over that little lump, you know,
Right.
where you're like, all right, you know, it is what it is. Just go do it. You know, sometimes maybe you got cystic growth, or maybe you got some fatty tumor that isn't cancer at all, but maybe you got cancer, man. You want to nip it in the freaking bud if you can do it soon. So
The sooner the better.
it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll be honest. I waited a long time on 2 different cancers, and you know, I had thyroid cancer. I had a inflamed lymph node that was visible. I had a lump on my neck. Who's got lumps on their neck? What human do you know has a lump on their neck? Get that shit checked.
It's hard, you know. Sometimes
Right.
it's hard to just be like, you know, you got to suck it up, Buttercup.
Right.
You need to
And,
go.
you know, the
Yeah,
next
because you
time
know
I got
that
this
the
call-
answer might not be all that great, and it's very difficult
Right.
to want to purposely go face it. It's, you know, a human condition,
Right.
I'm sure, you know.
the next time I get a
it's
golf
natural.
ball, a marble growing out of the side of my ankle, and I let that wait, and I let that wait, and then I bang it one day at Hash Bash, no less, and it bleeds like a sieve because it's supposedly viscous in nature, according to the doctor. Then whacks it off and sends it to the lab, only to find out it's some spindle sarcoma, which, you know, now we got to treat that, and I end up with this open wound that I've had for 3.5 years, and they radiated the spot, which, you know, I got my first tattoo thanks to cancer, but, you know, they radiated the spot, and now, you know, I went from having this little marble-sized hole to a fucking baseball-sized hole, and, you know, it's the slowest growing thing ever, but I'll tell you, I'm happy to be alive. I mean, you know, I'm happy I caught it when I did. The thyroid cancer wouldn't have been such a problem. I guess that's a good cancer to have, they say, because it's easily nipped. Right. The doctor said if I had to give you a list to pick, that's the one you want to pick.
Yeah,
hardcore.
it's always interesting hearing that, right?
Right. I can handle that. But you know, you gotta check those things out, and we all wait for whatever reason. But you know, it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, and so get your uncle or somebody on oil if you can. People are always like, "What do we do?" Just get them started on oil. Get them a low dose capsule or something, man. Whatever, and just do it. There's so much research out there now. There's no reason you can't look it up or find a good reference in a book to get started, get a regimen, actually show you how to make it yourself. It's all there. I have it in my library here at the house. So, you just got to do it. I'm glad everybody's doing well.
There's a lot of people who who have somebody that aren't, even if they're a little bit isolated, that aren't too many degrees away of having a legitimate account of benefiting from cannabis in some manner, and that growing amount of people using this and getting the word out to those immediately around them, particularly the skeptics, is very helpful. It's slow going, but there are a lot of people that wouldn't have considered this a few years ago that are grateful that they have discovered it now.
Absolutely.
Certainly the legalization of medicinal marijuana opened a lot of people's ability. Their minds were already open, but it was against the law. And believe it or not, there are people in this country that are law and order people and would not break the law. And as soon as it was legal, they went and tried it. Tried it. They hadn't even tried it medicinally before.
Yeah.
And you may not think that's a large number, but it actually is. It really is. The grandmas and the grandpas out there who actually read the newspaper, who paid attention to what was going on and heard the change happen. They didn't have to be smoking weed in the streets with their buddy and talking 420. So, it's a whole new culture. And the medicinal thing, I think anybody that works or runs a dispensary would tell you that they see these older customers, they're senior citizens that never smoked cannabis or hadn't smoked cannabis in 40 years and aren't buying cannabis now. They're buying gummies and, all kinds of edibles and stuff.
I never would have considered, like, for me growing up, like military, I had security clearance, the whole deal. Like, I was on team boogeyman when it came to you couldn't touch it. And then, but through my own disability and through my own illness, I got to the point to where I had no other options, where it became, I was looking for life-saving, anything that would help me. And I remember 2012, I think, the first time back when like dispensaries weren't really legal, but they were kind of popping up all over the place, and hiding in my garage with this joint going, what the fuck what do I do with this thing? I don't know. And I used it and I said, holy shit, I can eat. I feel better. And that was like, it was like the start of a beautiful relationship. But Adam's correct. Like, that's the one thing that legalization is positive for, that it does bring people in. Once you give it that legal kind of notion to it, that is probably saving people's lives. And I think we probably discount that more than it happens.
And we're really one more generation of die-off before the hardcore anti-weed people are just fucking gone. I mean, I'm far enough away from that generation that I can say that shit. But the reality is that, there's just
more
really
die-off
one generation left that would have been the anti-drug people. Get out of here. We didn't need you then. We don't need you now.
Well, who needs to hear about it anyways?
Right.
I mind my own business. You mind your own business.
Right.
So Don, what have we not talked about that you still would like to address or let people know about, or anything of interest coming up, whatever you'd like to make sure that we get included?
Well, if people could reach out, just like for cannabis bills, and ask for support on bills 5880 and 5881, informed consent for breast implants, that would be wonderful. Just a phone call or a message left, especially to the House Health Committee members right now. That's where it's at. So, something I started in October was doing baskets for cancer patients. and especially cancer patients that want to utilize oil, edibles, topicals, you know, every kind of edible, anything that you can think of medicinally wise. And, you know, I was able to get them blankets and, you know, comfort items as well. So I'm going to try to do it every October. So if there's anybody out there, you know, I only donated to 4 patients this time. It's not like I deal with hundreds of people all at once. So I'll probably have 4 to 6 people next October for breast cancer month. And so if anybody wants to donate oil or topicals, really come in handy. You know, a lot of us go through a lot of surgeries. About that time of the year, I'll be putting together gift bags, and I would greatly appreciate any donations. And I make sure they get to these gals. And like I said, I take kind of match what I get in donations, and I went out shopping, you know, to get comfort items as well that I knew that they might need. But I think it gets people over that hump because they didn't have to go to the dispensary and pick something out. They didn't have that pressure of what do I get? You know, this is stuff that works for a lot of people, and it's kind of right there, you know, Cannabis for Beginners, a little guide, especially for cancer patients. So I'm going to try to do it more often if I ever start feeling better on a regular basis. But any donations, you know, they'll go to a good home, I promise.
Yeah, I do hope that. I mean, it's happened before that some people have made some connections through here via some of the harms reduction people, and you know, some other donations. So it'd be nice to think that maybe we can churn up at least somebody to help out with some kind of donation for that kind of a distribution, because that makes a lot of sense.
And everybody's really generous. I will say, you know, as far as donations go. So I'm very appreciative, and patients are always very appreciative. So you know, it's great. Thank you.
Right. And you said Early Light that's a website?
Oh, First Light a Healing Way.
First Light Healing Way, that is a website?
Yes, First Light a Healing Way. And I think I have a link in most of my social media stuff. I don't go to my social media stuff all the time, different platforms, but I go and check them out every once in a while. But the website, I get emails into my direct email box. So if anybody wants, you know, if they have questions or there's something that they can't find by going through the information on the website, I will be glad to talk to them.
It's firstlight@healingway.com or
Yep, First Light a healingway.com.
Okay.
It was with the crack of dawn, you know.
Yeah, that was cool. I didn't catch that at
let me
first.
get that one back, so we went with First Light a Healing Way.
Nice. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it.
People can communicate to you, email or leave a message there or something like that?
Yes.
From there? Okay.
Yep. You know, and I appreciate it. I don't have any issues talking to people about crazy questions or you know, and there's a lot of people, you know, that might be, you know, maybe their husband has been prosecuting cannabis patients their whole life as a police officer, and they're like, man, nobody's going to want to take care of my wife with cancer. But you know what? We do take care of everybody. And
Nice.
so, you know, there's all kinds of different stigmas that people deal with that I'm sure a lot of people don't even have crossed their mind.
Right on. Well, I appreciate it. Okay,
One of
go
the
ahead.
stigma,
Go ahead, Paul.
say one of the stigmas, especially with the older people, is smoking. They don't want to be caught smoking, and you'll see that a lot of, and I see it all the time, as people who are in their 70s and the like, who are like, "Oh, I love these gummies," but they would never imagine smoking or taking something that didn't already resemble something in their lives, because they're already taking like the fiber gummy and the vitamin C gummy and, you know, whatever it is.
Yep.
And now they're just introducing this other gummy into their life, and they're not becoming something that they're not, right? They're not crossing into some subculture. You're bringing the culture to them. You're making it all available to them.
Agreed.
So Rick is in the comments, but he's not jumping on here.
Hello, Rick.
So we are not Rickless.
Yeah, I guess it's, I don't know. Yeah, this is we remain Rickless, or if this is a mar on that record for the whole show, or not? Because he shows up in the comments.
Really watching, making sure it was up to snuff, right? Keep it all under control. Your secret shopping, huh?
And so we might not get deep into the conversion oil conspiracy theory, but it is interesting that we saw it, or we all thought that it was going to be included in the rules, and then all of a sudden that was retracted. I think somebody has my audio on independently. Do you hear that echo? Or is that just me?
I hear slight echo.
Okay. I hope that it's not a huge issue. But you know, there were, yeah.
Okay.
So there were a lot of people. Yeah, doing it. Who really didn't like it. Here he is. There's a lot of people. And when I say here he is, I do mean they're no longer Rickless by every definition.
The big Rick energy.
But when the conversion oil thing was, destined to be in the new rules and a part of, the ability of the commercial interest to participate, there was a lot of opposition from a lot of different angles. I didn't particularly pay that much of attention or participate in much of it. Hey, let me see if I can figure out where this is going. Hello?
Jamie,
Hello.
there's a terrible echo on my line. I don't know if you guys, anyone else hearing it?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So,
You still there?
I'm here.
Hello.
You are not Rickless.
Yeah, keep on hearing that echo. Where the fuck is that coming from?
Whoa.
Here, I'm gonna mute everybody and talk. Is it still there? No, coming from somewhere. It's
It
coming
went
from
away,
somewhere.
I think.
So it's not me. I'm not muted.
Hold on.
Right?
Is this it?
Yeah.
I think Paul might be the culprit.
Really? Try it.
Yep. Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Yeah.
Oh, it is Paul. Oh no.
It's the lawyer.
Hello.
The lawyer did it.
The lawyer did it.
I'm not even sure how that's possible. It's just the iPad. Okay.
So Jamie, did you ask me a question previously? I didn't hear.
I gotta run. I gotta go attend to some things before the end of the day here. I'll see you guys next week.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Take care,
Paul.
brother. See you later,
Be
Paul.
well.
Take it
See you
easy.
soon, guys. Thank you much.
See you, man. Hello. And the
Yeah.
echo went with him. All right. So sad to see him go. Happy there's no more echo. Yeah, I brought up the conversion oil situation and how when that was destined to be housed under the commercial system, there were a lot of businesses didn't like the idea of it. A lot of hemp organizations didn't like the idea of it. Consumer group, I know that Rick was involved in, didn't like the idea of it. And all of a sudden, citing a lot of the opposition, the MRA, CRA, takes it off the table.
Well, there's been a discussion going on the last week or so about Lake Superior State. Lake Superior State has far advanced testing capabilities than our regular cannabis industry testing labs do. And Lake Superior State tested some conversion oil and found 2 spikes in areas which correspond to carcinogenic substances. And that's not the only time that there's been a question about the health consequence of conversion oil itself. So it's entirely possible that the MRA took a look at the scientific evidence and said, at this particular time, we don't want to have rules for this because we can't guarantee that it would be safe for people to consume, which is the responsible thing for them to do. But in reality, there were a lot of people in the state that were very worried because what it really did was open the door to hemp plants produced from outstate sources with lesser taxation and more favorable ecological conditions that would have come to Michigan and then been converted over to THC, which would definitely be a big market disruptor for all of the infrastructure that's already been built throughout the state. Now, I'm a big consumer advocate, and I don't really see conversion oil ever really messing with the caregiver or the private cultivator market itself. So there was always going to be a certain degree that we were insulated. But from a commercial perspective, it was just wrong. And in my opinion, too, with the hemp industry in the state having just no other infrastructure established, we don't really have any hemp paper mills established. We don't have any hemp to fiber mills established here. To get Michigan's hemp farmers have their legs cut out from underneath them because they're having hemp imported from Kentucky or Alabama, where they can produce it for a quarter of the cost that we could produce here in Michigan. It really would have been, in my opinion, totally unfair to the people that had put their dreams into this entire industry itself too. So I'm not going to cry for any corporatists who may have lost an opportunity that they were speculating money on. As far as I'm concerned, there was a fool's gambit to begin with. However, I am really glad that we're protecting all of the folks who've already invested in the hemp industry or in the cannabis cultivation industry, and not allowing this out-of-state sourcing to come in and really undercut all of the work that's been done too. We're already in a race to the bottom. As far as consumers go, we're winning. We're winning every single day that the price drops in retail stores, and that it gets closer to what we know to be an acceptable level of pricing in an unregulated market scenario. But man, I mean, conversion oil just looked like a really poison pill for the entire system. And when you looked at the potential for damage that it had, you had to wonder, why would the MRA ever consider it in the first place? And my conclusion is just that it had so many corporate sponsors, so many corporations and entities that wanted it. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, I was going to say, and this is a classic example of activism at work. The MRA people didn't know. They didn't know they didn't know. They were presented with a product. They had an industry or a culture behind it, so they thought. And they said, you know what? We'll bring this to market. We'll ask the people. We'll get some ideas. And fortunately, enough people responded saying, whoa, wait a minute. That's not what you think it is. That's not going to work the way you think it's going to work. Here's what it's going to do. And they actually listened. Yeah. And they made a decision that even their decision caused question, because there are people out there going, what did they just say? What? They're not going to add this? They don't want our comment anymore? They're going to cancel a meeting? What? I mean, so it just shows that we have to be proactive with these people, because they are making the rules based on the knowledge they have. And so some of us need to impart some of the knowledge we have on them. And fortunately, it appears they listen.
It seems like we've never had a government more willing to listen to what we have to say than we have right now, especially when it comes to cannabis. I can't recall another time.
I think that's because the government has proven that they were lying and bullshitting.
I also think there's some money involved in the new industry, and they want to make sure that they're streamlining the process of collecting said cashola. But for whatever reason, they're finally interested in what we have to say, Adam. Go ahead.
Right. But they're paying it out, so we're getting other people interested.
It's popular
all these communities that are voting no and their neighbors are voting yes. Wait till the road stops at your fucking border and the potholes begin, because then you're not able to do the things in your community that you need to do, because you don't have that extra 100, 200, 600 $1 million, whatever the hell it's coming your way.
$56,000 per retailer was a pretty tall incentive this year. And again, we tried for years to get people to come to cannabis law reform for social justice reasons, for freedom and liberty reasons, for compassionate reasons, and we couldn't drag them there on a leash. But as soon as there's a dollar bill on the ground, they jump on the floor like pigs in mud. So I mean, I hate to say it that way, but once the cash idea came up big, communities have swapped their old school attitudes for let's embrace this new monetary source. So I know it's close to time, and I'm sorry that I took up so much of the end of the show there, Jamie. Go ahead and close it out, big man.
Well, I'm thinking that we have room to continue this discussion. Anyway, we can cliffhanger this and definitely dig in and get more to the conspiratorial maybe aspects of it.
We'll Rick Hanger it. We won't cliffhanger it. We'll Rick Hanger it.
Rick Hanger.
Well, that's a Rickful show.
All right, Rick Hanger, and then
Richard. That's hilarious. A Rick Hanger. Ooh, that small? Okay. So hilarious stuff.
All right, so let's just make sure everybody's ready to wrap this up. Anybody want to include anything, any upcoming events, anything like that? We might be a couple minutes over, but no big deal at this point. Anton, anything you want to make sure you get in?
Sure. Come check us out tomorrow at Lighten Up Dispensary up in Flint. Rick, I know you'll be there. We'll be hanging out. I think we're going to be doing the 420 post from there as well. 5-pound giveaway. 3 pounds is going to, they have different prize levels, but 2 pounds is being reserved to give away to veterans. So if you're a vet, come on out and see if you can win you some good smoke. So see you tomorrow. We'll be there. I believe, Rick, you'll be there between 1 and 4. Hanging out, so
Yep.
I'll be there around, so say noon to 5. I think a couple of vendors will be there a little bit later. Come say hi.
There's
Very
also
cool.
a hemp expo coming to Lansing, I think in June.
Yep,
I might be wrong on the date,
Mm-hmm.
May or June, but
Yep.
there's going to be a lot of good information there as well. I'll be speaking. There'll be a lot of good speakers there.
I'll see you there, Don. I'll be speaking as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I'll be watching for you.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Adam's doing something with Richard Clement and Dr. Detroit, and kind of doing an OG type panel on
Nice.
Friday of that event.
Oh, nice.
I will be there to watch that. Maybe
All
we'll
right.
see you all.
Adam, anything else?
No, it's the week of 420, which is a midweek adventure. So
Yeah. And oftentimes we go over the history of 420, and you usually describe it.
yeah, I mean, I could do that real quick. I just like the consternation between Steve Hager and Steve Bloom over at High Times over how 420 got from the small little mountaintop in San Rafael, where the fellas, the Waldos, was this little high school gang of kids that used to meet at 420 at this Pasteur statue. And anyways, that eventually ended up on a flyer, according to Steve Bloom, in a Grateful Dead show. And he brought it back to Steve Hager, who then turned it into some ceremonial thing. And 20, 30 years later, that's what we have today, is this new fad called 420, which when it started, I was running a head shop and we used to sell stickers. All of a sudden the catalog had these 420 things, and here I am active in the weed game, and I'm thinking, why would anybody want to tell on themselves? Okay. Started carrying the stickers, sold the shit out of them. It was like the most awesome fad I thought I was ever witnessing, which has not gone away. Therefore, it wasn't a fad. To the point that we mentioned it earlier, that the city of Denver is actually promoting the 420 festival on their town square, or whatever the hell it is, even though it's a cannabis-free event and they don't allow cannabis in there. They are promoting the 7 beer tents for the 420 festival in Denver. So I just think it's interesting how far we've come with the 420 thing.
Yeah, it's a big
and
deal.
I guess
man.
now in most places, having that bumper sticker on your car isn't going to put you at risk. But,
Might find you a smoking buddy.
right, there you go. So, I guess it's all right. We always wore, like the bikers wore number 13 on there for the weed bike. The potheads that were bikers always had a 13 patch. if they were weed smokers, or an 8-ball if they did cocaine. So I was down with that kind of iconography. But the 420 thing, it's interesting because it didn't come from anything but a couple of guys, and somehow it got out from this group of fellas, and it never meant anything about a pot arrest or anything like that. Those stories have been floated, and High Times eventually got the Waldos together at a cannabis cup, and that was kind of cool. But yeah, it's kind of some awesome weed history, if you ask me, because who would have ever thought that this would have gotten as far as it got? You know, it's a national holiday, for God's sake. You know.
Yeah, it makes for a busy week. You know, Rick was does some work for Redemption, and he's going to be busy this week, today and tomorrow, as Anton said. He's going to be up in Inkster today. He's going to be up in Flint, lighting up tomorrow, and that's because this is a busy week. So
Holiday week.
yeah, it is. I've got a lot of cool stuff going on in April concerning cannabis. So anyway, Rick, with that, anything you want to add before we shut it down? Thanks for coming on. At least
No, I'm glad to be able to join you for the last couple of minutes, and I'll be should be back in full swing next week.
Right on. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks, Don, for being on for the whole time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Nice to talk to everybody.
Yep. And I hope people get in touch with you that can help out as testimonials for the support for the legislation and help patients.
Absolutely.
And
Anybody can
thanks
get a
to
hold
Paul
of me. Thanks.
and everybody else who's been on. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Have a good
See
week,
ya.
Jazz Cabbage.